In another sign that we've likely reached the end of an era for Paul Goldschmidt in St. Louis, the Cardinals are not extending him a qualifying offer before Monday's deadline. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Monday afternoon, November 4th, 2024, and today we're talking about a couple of topics. We'll start off talking Paul Goldschmidt, as it has been reported that the Cardinals will not offer Goldy a qualifying offer. Talk about whether that's a surprising move. Not really, but we'll explain the details behind it, as well as discussing Gold Glove information from last night. The Cardinals ended up going 0 for 3. Did any of the Cardinals Gold Glove finalists get robbed of the award? Because, well, none of them won. So we'll talk about those topics on today's show. Appreciate you guys for listening to me as always. Make sure you do subscribe to the channel. Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer on YouTube for Cardinals updates and coverage throughout the offseason. It's going to be a busy one. Kind of off to a little bit of a slow start. We got some news last week about a couple of different topics that we talked about on the podcast, and I think it's all going to begin to ramp up pretty soon. You'll have the general managers meetings and then the winter meetings in early December, and by then I think we'll start to see some moving and shaking on what a busy Cardinals offseason could entail. And a reminder, if you enjoy the coverage on the channel or on the Spotify feed for B-Schaeff Daily, make sure to consider a channel membership on YouTube. The link there is in the description below to this video. So let's get into the news from Monday. I saw it via John Denton's Twitter feed. You can follow John at JohnDenton555. He covers the Cardinals as a beat writer for MLB.com. He said, as expected, the Cardinals will not extend a qualifying offer to free agent first baseman Paul Goldschmidt per Pobo John Mozeliak. The deadline to do so is 4 p.m. Central Time on Monday. If extended and he had chosen to sign it, the qualifying offer would have guaranteed Goldschmidt a salary of $21.05 million for 2025. It has seemed for some time as though the Cardinals and Goldschmidt would go their separate ways this offseason. While Monday's news does not guarantee it officially, it seems to be all but official that that's going to be the case regardless. But it is a step toward that direction, given that the Cardinals could have decided to tender the offer to Goldschmidt of a QO, and as it was reported by JD, that's around $21 million that Goldy would have earned if he had chosen to sign a qualifying offer that the Cardinals tendered him. Now, the Cardinals didn't offer it because, well, it's pretty clear that they're looking to go in a different direction when it comes to their payroll this coming season, and that direction does not seemingly include $21 million for Goldschmidt. There would have been a justification for trying to offer it to him if the Cardinals were pretty sure that he was going to decline it, because, of course, when you do offer the qualifying offer to impending free agents, and those guys go sign multi-year deals elsewhere, you end up recouping a draft pick, and it depends on the amount of salary that the new contract is worth with whatever team that the guy signs. Depending on that, you would end up with a second-rounder or a third-rounder in the upcoming MLB draft next summer. But the Cardinals probably correctly identified that Goldschmidt isn't necessarily going to see a contract value of $21 million per season on the open market, and something that happens when you offer that qualifying offer to a player and he declines it, the team that looks to sign that guy in free agency suddenly has to add a different level of calculus into whether or not they want to offer on that player, because that's the team that loses the draft pick that you as the Cardinals would regain in the deal. So if you're the Cardinals and you say, we don't really want Goldschmidt back, but we think he's probably going to sign for a 3-year contract, say $50 million total, which would be about $16-17 million per season. You could still make that gamble and say, all right, he's thinking he's going to get $50-60 million. He's not going to take our $21 million, even though it's a higher value for that one season. The guaranteed dollars of $21 million versus 50 or 60, if Goldy is thinking he can get that on the open market. And I'm just speculating. I really don't know what it's going to look like as far as the free agent contract for Paul Goldschmidt. I don't know what the expectation is. I'll have a look and see whether MLB trade rumors, normally they end up putting up their expectations of the top 50 or whatever free agents each year and what they expect those guys to sign for. Doesn't mean they're right, but I know that that's an organization and an entity that does put that kind of information out there, taking a guess. But for me, like, could I see Paul Goldschmidt signing 3 years, $15 million per year or so, something like that, something between $45 to maybe $50, $55 million? if he wants a 3-year contract. I think that's within the realm of possibility, despite the numbers declining for Goldy this past season. He was a below-league average player offensively for the first time in his career, according to OPS Plus, a 98 OPS Plus, which makes him 2% below league average for the season. 716 was the total OPS, and his on-base was just above 300 at 302. So a big-time down season for Goldy, who now is 37 years old, going to go into 2025 in his age 37 season after turning 37 in September. I don't know whether that's going to materialize into a multi-year deal for Goldy. I was just sort of guessing that could be a possibility. And it looks like I'm going to be out of luck as far as relying on MLB trade rumors to identify what their expectations are for his contract, because it looks like for the first time they have put that behind a paywall, and I am not necessarily intending to pay for that, although maybe at some point if it becomes the best way to get the information, maybe I will. But for now, I just now saw that it was not free to access as it has been in previous seasons. So forget what I said about that. I'm just taking a guess, though. Could a team like the Brewers, could a team like maybe the Orioles, could there be a team out there that on the down year of Goldy expects he's still got more left in the tank and could find a way to get the value out of him to make a 2 or 3 year type of contract worthwhile? Maybe, but it's going to be less than that $21 million per year, in my opinion, which would have been the value if the Cardinals had extended the qualifying offer and he had accepted it. So if you're the Cardinals and you don't want to have to be responsible for $21 million Paul Goldschmidt next year, it's a hard thing to take the risk and say, we'll offer it to him, because what if he takes it, right? What if he accepts it? And because he understands that, okay, you offered me this deal and I'm not going to get this on the open market on an AAV basis, but I might be able to recoup some value if I play one really good year, and then I can sign a 2-year deal after that if I want to make that bet on myself. And also, if I decline your qualifying offer, that is going to be the piano on the back of my status as a free agent, because every team that now might like to offer me that 3-year, $45 million or $50 million total contract, they might have to reconsider that because of the cost value of a draft pick. And some teams don't really care about that. If they're dead set on thinking they're a veteran first baseman away from being able to really contend for a championship, then you're not going to let a second round or a third round pick get in the way of that. I think the number is $50 million. So if it's over $50 million for the total contract, it ends up being a second round pick. If it's below that, I think it's a third round pick is the way that it breaks down. And technically, to get even more specific, the pick would come not really as a second round or third round specifically. It's the highest ranking pick that the organization has after their first round pick, which is usually a second round pick, but sometimes it's a competitive balance pick or whatever the case might be. That's what you would give up if you sign a guy for more than $50 million who had the qualifying offer, and it's a third round pick or whatever the pick happens after the competitive balance round B, which comes after round 2, which is basically sandwiched right there before the third round. So it would be an early third round pick typically, and then a early second round pick if it makes sense. But sometimes it's obviously going to depend on what picks that team had to give up in the first place. What picks did they have in their possession? Did they have any competitive balance picks that could be ushered into that? But nevertheless, it's a little bit convoluted. I think the situation that Goldy would be in right now, it would put him right on that line to potentially be worth $50 million if he's getting a third year. If he's not, I don't think he's going to be particularly close to reaching that $50 million threshold with his next contract. If it's a 2-year contract, then you're probably talking about less than $40 million guaranteed to Goldschmidt. At which point it's close enough. If there's an offer of 2 years, $15 million per year, that's $30 million for Goldy. And this is obviously down considerably compared to what he has been earning on his most recent contract, which was the extension that he signed with the Cardinals shortly after the trade that brought him to St. Louis. He's been getting like $26 million per year since 2020. So that's to decline the $21 million, or if you're the Cardinals, to phrase this correctly, to decline to offer him a $21 million qualifying offer, that alone is a $5 million reduction on what he has been earning. And based on the drastic decline to his production this season, the Cardinals said, he might take it if we offered to him. And it's not that they wouldn't be happy to have Paul Goldschmidt back under the right circumstances, and maybe they will, wait out his market. And if he's not signed right away by a team, could the Cardinals dip back in and say it'd be a significant reduction, but would you do, 2 years and $20 million total with incentives? Like, maybe there is room for that, but I just don't anticipate it. I don't think he's going to be back with the team. I think the Cardinals are going to take 2025 to move in a new direction, to find out some information about some of the younger players, or sometimes not even younger. Like a Luken Baker's not all that young. I think he's like 27 years old, going to be 27. But he's less proven. We don't know as much about him. And if you're the Cardinals planning a lower payroll for 2025, I think it makes sense potentially to fill some of these roster spots with guys you need to learn about, and then you can make some decisions on whether they're worth keeping around. And that usually pertains to the younger players. Luken Baker might be in that seat. We might find out later this month that he's non-tendered, that they don't, want to pay him to be on the 40-man roster and have him make the big league guaranteed money, and they're going to look to go elsewhere with that bench spot. They could decide that. I think we saw enough of a glimpse of Luken Baker, combined with the fact that you don't have a lot of really robust right-handed hitting first base options, to maybe give him a look coming into spring training to make the roster, whether it's a platoon with Alec Burleson at first, whether it's you don't trade Contreras, so you're finding a way to get Ivan Herrera's bat into the lineup and he picks up a first baseman's mitt from time to time, like whatever the case might be there. I think the Cardinals are going to lean more toward either internal options, or there could be, a $3 to $5 million veteran like a Carlos Santana or something, who I saw today he wants to play 3 more years, despite the fact that he's already 38 years old. Not an obvious smash play for anybody, but if you're talking about low-cost option that gives you a little bit of that veteran experience, but on the cheap, like the Cardinals might decide to delve into that realm. I would think it would be preferable to decide upon some internal options that can play first base and give them the opportunity to do that. Burleson, as an example, we talked about Baker, one of the catchers maybe, rather than spend money on it's really the roster spot that you'd be occupying. And I think right now, if you're talking about a 2025 where the Cardinals are not going to be particularly competitive, at least on paper coming into the year, they're not going to be spending like it's their mission to win the Central. That's not going to be the goal. I think it's owed to the fan base to at least give folks a chance to see some of these lesser known players that could potentially turn into fixtures on future years' competitive teams. Like, that's got to be the way the Cardinals go about it. I'm not totally against the idea of plugging in a veteran or two for whether it's the bench or whether it's, a fourth outfielder because they've made some trades. I don't think that's the end of the world if they go that route. I just think it might make sense first to explore and exhaust every possibility of the internal options and where they might fit, if indeed you're going with a lesser payroll, as we expect the Cardinals to do next year. So that's the news from Monday. Paul Goldschmidt is not going to get a qualifying offer. I think that at the beginning of 2024, if we had told you then that it would not be a QO for Goldy and the Cardinals are simply going to let him walk after 2024, that would have been probably a shocking thing to say at the time, because if nothing else, you figure Goldy would post his at least like an 800 OPS. I think he was 810 in 2023, which was a real decline for him, especially compared to that MVP season. He had just come off of a 981 OPS, went down to 810. Now he's down to 716. Even if you expected Goldy to continue declining, I don't know if people thought he was going to drop off basically another 100 points of OPS between 2023 and 2024. But that's what's happened, and it's gotten to the point where very unceremoniously we're going to see Paul Goldschmidt almost certainly make his departure from the St. Louis Cardinals this winter. It will be interesting to see, at least to me, where he ends up. Even though I saw Rhys Hoskins picked up the player option to go back to Milwaukee, I think the Brewers would be really interesting in an era where you can plug guys around and have DH and different things like that. I think he'd be a very interesting fit in Milwaukee. There could be some American League teams that, look, like Goldschmidt, I still think is a plus first baseman defensively. I don't know that he's one of the best 5 first basemen in the league, or if he's top 10 still, or whatever case might be, but I still think he would bring a good presence from that perspective. And if the price is right, there's going to be a contending team that it'll feel like a luxury to have a Paul Goldschmidt added to their team. I feel like that's going to be the way that this plays out. But it does seem like Goldy and the Cardinals is a match that no longer will be in play. So let me know about your thoughts on that, Cardinals fans, as the news comes today. No qualifying offer for Goldy. Not a particular surprise, but still to see the finality of that, you go, all right, that's another sign that he's probably heading elsewhere. Also wanted to talk a little bit about the Gold Glove Awards that were announced on Sunday night. The Cardinals had 3 finalists They had the third baseman finalist with Nolan Arenado. They had the finalist at shortstop with Mason Wynn. And they had Brenden Donovan as the utility finalist, an award that he had won previously back in 2022. But ultimately, Ofer is the way it breaks down for the Cardinals. We talked in our podcast a few weeks ago about the way that these races could line up. I would have been surprised to see Arenado win because we looked into it and said, oh, yeah, Matt Chapman, he's had the Gold Glove streak basically similar to what Arenado had snapped a year ago, but he had been in the American League the entire time. He was the winner in the AL in 18, 19, 21, and 23. Chapman goes from the American League. I think he started with the Athletics and then went to Toronto, comes over to the Giants, and he takes the award. It was Cabrian Hayes that won it over Arenado last year, and this year it's Matt Chapman. So nothing there for Arenado. It wasn't particularly surprised by that. I was a little bit surprised by the other two. I really thought Brenden Donovan would end up getting the utility award just because it's one that he had won before, and you kind of figured that there could be an edge based on just how good he was in left field. I thought at some point you could see Donovan, if he's a full-time left fielder, contend for a Gold Glove just for his work as an outfielder. That's how athletic he is, but does a nice job in the infield as well. And I was a little bit surprised that it ended up going to Pittsburgh's Jared Triolo instead of Donovan. And then the one that I guess I was kind of talking myself into it happening for Mason Wynn, but just didn't end up doing it, is that shortstop award. I was surprised by the time it was announced because he won the Fielding Bible Award, which is another entity that gives out the awards positionally. And a lot of times you'll see the Fielding Bible winner end up being the Gold Glove winner as well. And we talked about how with the rookie status of Mason Wynn, while he's not going to end up being Rookie of the Year, he does have that cachet attached to him that he's an exciting young player, and a lot of times you see folks want to highlight those things. And the numbers really did back up Mason Wynn being a really quality candidate, but it ends up being Ezekiel Tovar for Colorado that takes home the award instead of Mason Wynn. So Wynn's going to have to wait another year for his first chance at a Gold Glove. I do think he'll eventually get one. And then we talked about, too, the Cardinal that was not even named as a finalist at his position, but probably should have been if he was eligible, which it was determined, I think, that Michael Ciani was, but in center field, Ciani did not end up finishing as a finalist, which really just means in the top three. They announced who the finalists were. Ciani was left out of that a couple of weeks ago when it was announced, so we knew that he wouldn't end up with a Gold Glove last night, but 0 for 3 for the Cardinals finalists, and really 0 for 4 on the folks that I would have thought by midsummer would have been at least candidates, as Michael Ciani was a really good defender for the Cardinals this season. Talked about, too, that we thought maybe the Cardinals gave him playing time over Victor Scott in September to try to boost his candidacy. Not sure how involved that aspect of it was, but it obviously, if it was their effort, it was in vain, as he didn't end up as a finalist. But I think you could definitely see if Ciani gets enough innings, whether that's with the Cardinals or not. We know that there could be some trades coming, and the Cardinals do like Ciani, but Victor Scott II is somebody that probably possesses higher potential offensively, so maybe there is a deal there. But regardless, I think if Ciani ever logs a full season, he would be a really strong candidate as a Gold Glover in center field. He is a very, very fine defender. So we'll see what ends up happening there, as a lot of the moving and shaking could come to the Cardinals roster this offseason. And, of course, it's going to center around the big three, Arenado, Sonny Gray, and Wilson Contreras. Whether any of those guys or multiple from that group are traded is going to have ripple effects on the rest of the roster. And really, the Cardinals could be at the center of the entire MLB offseason when it comes to holding the cards to one of the most prominent position players that could be dealt in Arenado. I would say that Sonny Gray, you're probably not going to see a bigger name in the trade market than him from a starting pitcher perspective. And then Wilson Contreras, if there are catcher-needy teams out there, there may be the perception around the league that he comes with some baggage because of the way that things went last year when he first signed with the Cardinals. I think if you've been plugged into that situation, it was a bad rap and a raw deal that Wilson Contreras ended up taking on from that whole situation last year. But maybe that could have some level of impact in how tradable he would be. But his contract is not too crazy. Pretty big deal for Sonny Gray, and still quite a few million remaining on the Arenado deal as well. So I really don't know the way that that's going to shake out, but that's going to be a constant conversation that we discuss on the channel this offseason as the Cardinals, again, we think they're trimming payroll. They have contributed to that belief so far with the moves that they have made, not only in Monday not taken the risk of offering Goldy a qualifying offer, which, again, they could have done. They could have tried to slide in there, call his bluff, essentially, and say, you're not going to accept this. We know you're going to try to get a multi-year contract, and you can go do that, but we'll get the draft pick when you do. I think it was the right decision to not do it if the Cardinals are in position where they really would not have felt comfortable with adding the $21 million to the payroll. Do I think that sucks? Yes. I should be clear about that as well, that I'm not excited about it. I think, Cardinals fans are deprived of the opportunity to have Paul Goldschmidt finish his career with the Cardinals. Feels a little bit different than some of the other legacy guys like a Waino or a Yachty, and even Albert. That was like a 1-year comeback to be able to say goodbye. Goldy did not obviously start his career with the Cardinals, but it feels like he's been around for a long time, and he was a consummate Cardinal while he was here. And it's just a shame that the combination of his decline, timing out with the Cardinals deciding that they're not going to be as willing to spend money over the next couple of years, results in this situation. And look, from a competitive standpoint, there were certainly times last year where you would have said, it's not really even about the money. It's about the opportunity cost of having Goldschmidt be sort of an anchor in a bad way, holding back and weighing down the lineup. And, I mean, certainly his numbers with runners in scoring position were appalling. And it's kind of crazy to think how that was even the case for Paul Goldschmidt, given his track record. But it was a really tough year for Goldy in that category. And it was an aspect of it that tanked his overall numbers too. But you also can think about it from July 1st to the end of the season. Paul Goldschmidt, basically the second half of the year, hit .269 with a .310 on base, but a .474 slug, which was much improved, had 11 homers over the second half of the season, and that equated to a .784 OPS, which is still lower than what he had in what we considered to be a down year at the time of 2023. Remember, his OPS that year was .810. From July 1st onward, this past summer, he ended up with a .784 OPS. So still moderately productive, just not the kind of deal that you're probably looking to say, yeah, that's worth $21 million, whether you're in a spot where you can afford to or not, right? It's just one of those positions that I think even if the Cardinals were not trimming payroll, they might make a decision to go a different route. Now, they might be spending that $21 million on another free agent first baseman. Maybe you go after and I don't know what's going to happen with, say, Pete Alonso or anybody else who might be on the free agent market at first base. But, you could say, yeah, if Alonso is worth, say, $25 million a year, you sign him to a 4-year, $100 million contract. If the Cardinals were looking to still be as competitive as they've looked to be in recent years, that might have been a way to go about it. Christian Walker, from Arizona, where that could be another place that Goldschmidt lands if they feel they can get him for cheaper than whatever Christian Walker, who's a few years younger, might end up demanding, then they could potentially go that route and bring, that could be a reunion tour for him, for the fan base in Arizona that would care to have Goldy back, because he never left of his own accord. Remember, he was traded before when they weren't willing to give him a contract, and then ultimately the Cardinals said, yeah, well, not only will we trade for him, we will sign him to that extension before he ever takes the field for us. So, I mean, Goldy is still probably among one of the top free agent first basemen. Anthony Rizzo might be in that mix as well, as I'm looking at a list here, and they had Rhys Hoskins on Yahoo Sports listed as the number 5 first baseman, but he has since exercised his $18 million player option to return to the Brewers. So the Cardinals could potentially, in another timeline, another universe, make a run at Alonso or Christian Walker, understanding that the value on that $20 to $25 million per year, if it ends up being in that range, could be better on paper than what Goldy might provide. But I also thought that Goldy was just going to be, even though he didn't start out with the Cardinals, one of those legacy type of guys. And it's kind of a shame to see it end that way, because he really was the kind of guy that I feel like is fun to root for, you want to root for, and represented the Cardinals very well during his time here. But again, the production declined, and the Cardinals are in the spot that they're in from a financial standpoint. So I think we have seen him play his last game with St. Louis. Let me know, guys, what you think about Goldy, what you think about the Gold Glove Awards not ending up tipping in the Cardinals' direction, and make sure to hit that subscribe button for more Cardinals content all off season long. Thank you guys so much for your support of the channel, of the podcast, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.